In this short series, we'll cover the processes involved in making a ROBLOX Obby. We'll start by creating some of the most common types of obstacles and stages. These will include typical jumps, thin parts to walk along, sets of 3 parts with only one being passable, so sort of like, I'll put an example on the screen, but the ones where you sort of have to guess, or you can use Can Collide with your camera to figure it out. We'll also figure out how to make lava and kill blocks, as well as disappearing parts. So parts which once you touch them, they disappear for maybe a few seconds. You might have seen something similar with maybe like a spiral. There's a trending model on the toolbox of like a spiral that goes around, and as you touch each part, it disappears. And we'll also learn to make wedge jumps, which are of course jumps made of wedges, which are just a bit more difficult to land. Those are just some of the types of obstacles we're going to cover. We'll then write code for the checkpoints between each stage in the next video. This will include a leader stat named stage, and that will display what stage each player is on. And then towards the end of the mini-series, we'll cover a skip stage developer product, and this will allow players to spend a few Robux just to skip the stage they're on if they're currently struggling. Maybe 10 Robux, and then they can skip to the next stage. We'll also cover a progress bar GUI, which will display how far into the obby the player is. Sort of like the one at the bottom of the screen here. This game here is Dimension Obby. It's a game I made a couple years ago, me and a few people. We don't work on the game anymore, so it's up to you if you want to play it, but I do recommend you give it a try if you would like to see what kind of obbies we have made. So this is the typical obby. It starts casual here, and then there are different dimensions, which you can see on the screen now, just as you progress throughout the obby. If you have any more suggestions, please use our suggest a video form, which you can find in the link in the description, or it can be found in the pinned comment, and we will have a look at the suggestions, and if it's related, we will add it to the series. And of course, even if your suggestion isn't related to obbies, please do make a suggestion and we'll write it down and take further action. If we like the idea, then we'll do a video on it. But that is it, so I'll see you in the first video where we'll be creating stages. I'll see you then. In this video, we will be covering the 6 types of fundamental obstacles you will see in obby games. These include typical jumps, where the player has to jump over gaps between parts. We're going to cover jumps with rectangular parts, spheres and wedges. Very thin parts the player has to walk across. Kill blocks that will kill the player when they're touched. And sets of parts where the player has to figure out which one can be collided with, if that makes sense. I'll put an example on the screen, and parts that disappear after they've been touched. Now, just before we do start, the game we will make throughout this little series, I will not be making public at the end, as I did with the Speed Simulator series, or the +1 jump every second, purely because we already have an obby out. If you would like to get an idea of what obbies, of an obby that we've made, do check out Dimension Obby. We don't really work on it anymore, but if you guys like it, then maybe we can get back to it. You can find the link to that game in the description. Okay, to get started, we're going to delete the base plate. Now, if we go to model and then we can click on spawn, we'll insert a spawn location into the game. Now, this is good for your typical ROBLOX game. However, because as you'll see in the next video when we work on checkpoints, we are going to use pre-named parts for our stages, and you want to start on stage 1. You don't want to start at the spawn location, you want to start on stage 1 unless you want to stage 0. So we're going to actually not use the spawn location, and we're going to add in a part and make this however big you want your checkpoints to be. We will cover this in more detail in the next video, but for now let's just create a rough template. Let's call it, for now we'll just rename it to spawn checkpoint. We will be renaming this in the future, but just for now, just for this video, just so we can work on the obstacles, let's keep it simple. Let's just make it, first of all, let's anchor it, and under model, let's hit scale, and we can make this as big as we want. I'm going to make this an 8x8. No, I'm not. I'm going to make this a 14x14. And if we now hit test and play here, as long as your camera is above the part, hitting test and play here, you'll see when we spawn in, we spawn on the checkpoint. If you want it bigger, make it bigger. If you want it smaller, make it smaller. but this is the sort of template I'm going to go with for now. So for now, just to differentiate the different stages we're going to make, I'm going to give each of these a different colour. So this first colour will be red, and then we'll go, how many, so we've got 6 obstacles, so 6 stages we're going to cover. So I'll do red, purple, blue, light blue, green, yellow, orange. That makes sense. So the first stage will be red. That is not a very nice colour on the eye. So first of all, let's cover jumps with rectangular parts. So what we want to do is under home, we want to add in a part into the workspace. And we're going to use the move tool. And what we want to do is sort of position this as far as you want the jump to be. This is the first stage, so we want to keep in mind that we want it easy. And I'm going to level it up if I go sideways, or we can top right where you see this little world view sort of button. We can click back and it will line us perfectly level, and then we can just make sure they are level like that. Now the reason everything's scaling perfectly for me is because I have under model, I have move ticked with 1 stud, so each move is moving it 1 stud. And my rotation's 45 degrees and snap to parts is on. If you want to sort of freely move this, just sort of like that, you can turn the move off, but I'm going to keep that on at 1 stud because it makes it a lot easier to design obbies. Now I want this to be the exact same length, and just like that, I think that's the first jump. I'll make this, let's make it green. If I right click this part and hit duplicate, or Control D, or I believe it's Command D if you're on Mac, not too sure, I can then drag it across, and the distance between the checkpoint and the part here, if we hold on to it, you see we get a little number. If we go all the way across, we can see it's 5 from the checkpoint. So we want this one to be, if we line them next to each other, just to be perfectly symmetrical, we want this one to be 5. So there we go, -5, and that is exactly the same jump. Let's have maybe 5 of these. There we go, just 4 of those will do, and now we'll duplicate the spawn checkpoint, and we'll rename this to checkpoint 2. And we'll drag this across, and once again, line it up, and we want this to be 5. Obviously design the levels how you want them, but I'm just showing off an example. Here we have our first stage. You can sort of see how it makes up a level. I'm going to click on this checkpoint 2 and make it purple. Now what I'm going to do is grab each of these 4 parts that we made here, and I'm going to right click and hit group as a folder. And what this does is it puts all 4 parts into one folder, which we can click on in the Explorer and drag them all together. It also just keeps our Explorer nice and tidy, which is something that is very important when it comes to making an obby. You do not want an Explorer with thousands of parts all over the place having to scroll forever. Keep everything in a nice folder. I am now going to right click and just rename this, and I'll just call it 1. The reason we're calling it 1 is because it's stage 1. Now what I'm going to do is right click that folder again and hit group as a folder again, and I'm going to rename this folder to stages. Now what we have is a stage folder. If we open this, we have 1, which is our first stage. And then when we make the second stage in a minute, we'll put it in the stages folder and call it 2. And you can see how it starts to make a bit more sense. It's just all about keeping the sort of Explorer nice and neat and clean on the eye. What we could do is actually group this stage 1, group it as a folder again and rename this folder to stage 1, or just call it 1 to 10. So this is the first 10 stages. So we have stage 1 in here, then we'll have stage 2. And then when we get to stage 11, we'll create an 11 to 20. It's just about keeping the Explorer nice. Anyway, for the next stage, we want to cover jumps with spheres. So let's have a look at how we would do that. Under part, I'm going to hit the sort of arrow underneath it, and we're going to click the sphere. Now, I'm going to colour it maybe light blue. And again, I'm going to try and line it up. If I hit the back again and hold Q on the keyboard or E, I can go up and down. So I'm going to hold Q, just some sort of level. And let's have a look. Where are we level? About here. It won't be perfect, but it's a sphere, so it doesn't really matter. And now I'll just sort of put that where I want. I might have these ones a bit more randomly spaced, so I'll duplicate that using Control D. Might make that go up a bit. Duplicate it again, might make this one go down, but sort of over here a bit. And maybe if I do one over here, up. You don't want to make the jumps impossible as well. And then maybe one just here, and then we'll get the checkpoint, which we will call checkpoint 3. There we go, and I'm just going to make the colour of this new checkpoint dark blue. Perfect. Now I want to select all those parts we've made. First of all, anchor them, and right click, group as a folder, and this is the second stage, so we'll give it the name of just the number 2, and then drag that into our 1 to 10 folder. And you can see how that sort of makes a bit more sense now. Now, something that is really important is we want to test each level after we make it, or a few levels at a time. There's nothing worse than making 10 levels, testing it, and it turns out that one of the jumps is impossible, so you have to change it all. I would test it after every single level you make. So to start, I'll hit test, and first of all I want to make sure my camera is over this red thing, so when we hit play here it does appear. If you want, we could add in a spawn location under model and then spawn, and just drag that on top for now, and then we'll remove that once we've added the checkpoint functionality. Now if we hit play, we go, so we jump across, so these jumps are all possible. We go into stage 2, this is a little bit trickier, but still possible. Perfect. Now we'll just quickly cover wedge jumps, so the exact same just with wedges. So to access wedges, it's under part and then wedge. You have got corner wedges and cylinders as well. I'm not going to cover them because at this point it's the exact same, it's just different shapes. I'm just wanted to sort of show everyone how to access the different shapes and play around with their sizes. So for this one I'm going to make this half the width of the checkpoint, but if I just make it longer and then a bit taller, first I'll just make it level as well, and I will just add these but sort of to the side a bit, one there and one there, just like that. They are not perfectly spaced, but that's alright. And we'll just whack this one here. This will be checkpoint 4. Again, the checkpoints are getting messy, we will sort them out in the next video. If you're going to make all your stages or loads of stages before the next one comes out, it's worth grouping all your checkpoints into a folder, which is actually what I'm going to do. I'm just going to select all my checkpoints, right click, hit group as a folder. I will rename this to checkpoints, and if just for the sake of the next video, what we will actually do is rename each checkpoint. So the spawn one will just be the number 1 because that's checkpoint 1. Checkpoint 2 will be number 2, checkpoint 3 will be number 3, and checkpoint 4 will be number 4. We can name it perfectly valid 1, 2, 3, 4 because it's in this checkpoints folder. We know what these are, so we don't need a name like checkpoint 1. We can just put 1 because we know it's a checkpoint because it's in the checkpoint folder. I hope that makes sense. Now I'll just quickly select these wedges. Of course, make sure I anchor them. Always make sure you anchor them because that stops the parts falling into the void and disappearing. And now what we will do is we will right click, let me select them again, group as a folder. This will be 3, and drag that into our 1 to 10 folder. And I'm also going to make each of these parts yellow. You could make them different colours, it's up to you. Now we will change the colour of this part, this checkpoint, to a light blue. Okay, now let's look at making some thin parts that the player can walk across. So I'm going to add in a part in here, and once again we'll just line it up as we have been doing. Just bring it out into the front, and we want the back view. Hold down Q on the keyboard, and then we can get level. Just sort of see where that is. There we go, that's perfect. Now I'm going to have it here, and I'm going to scale it inwards. That's what I'm going to do. By holding control and the blue one, I can actually scale this in evenly from both sides rather than having to do that then that. If I just hold control, I can make it nice and easy, and we'll just extend this along here, and I'm going to move this all the way onto this side. And what I might do is actually duplicate it and make another one just in front of it, which is going to come across this way, just so we're in line with this checkpoint. I'm not sure if that's, let's go for top view. I think it needs to come out one more, there we go. And duplicate that again, same thing, bring it out in front of this one we've just made and extend it along. And I think I will have the next checkpoint just here. So we'll call this checkpoint, we'll call this number 5. We'll select these 3 parts, we want to anchor them, right click, group as a folder, drag that into our stages folder, into our 1 to 10. And this will be stage 4. I'm also just going to colour them because why not? Let's make them all like a red sort of colour. Maybe like a light red. There we go. And I will make this checkpoint colour light green. There we go, or sort of a lime colour. Now let's have a look at some kill blocks. Now we are going to create some script. It'll be very easy, but just before we do, let's actually create these kill blocks. So what I'm going to do is just have a walkway. So I'm going to make a part, which I'm going to bring down just in front of, let me make sure, obviously this is all level again, yep. Just going to put it in front of this checkpoint, extend it out a little bit, and the only thing I'm going to do here is add some kill blocks. So I might just make this, let's go for yellow, and then I'll make the other checkpoint first as well, just to quickly get that out of the way, and I'll rename this to checkpoint 6. I'll just make the colour, I think next is yellow. Oh, that is not a very good colour, so let's change the colour of this walkway to orange. There we go, that just looks a bit, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking there. Now I'm going to add in another part on here, and this is going to be one of my kill bricks. So if I just make this expand it across, make it really thin, and the player's going to have to jump over this, and there's going to be a few of them, and if they hit it, they're going to die. So I think it makes sense to make a kill block red. I would say so anyway. And I'm going to rename this part just a kill brick or kill part, just so we know that it's a part that kills you. Now what we need to do in here is actually add in a script. So if we go to this add, we can add in a script, and in this script we first of all want to get the part. So part equals script.Parent. Now what we want to do is call a function whenever the part's touched. To do that we'll say part.touched :connect function, and we're going to pass in hit as a parameter. Hit is the object that touches the part. It's automatically passed through. Now we need to get the player's character, so we'll say local char or character equals hit.parent, because the idea is if say the player's left leg hits the part, the parent of that will be the player's character. And then we could say if char then, so if there is a character, if the character exists, local humanoid equals, we want to do char : find first child humanoid. And this is storing the player's humanoid in a variable. The reason we want to do this, well, first of all, just because something touched the part doesn't mean it's the player. So it could still have a parent, which wouldn't be a player. So the humanoid is a way of verifying that it's the player, because players have humanoids. We also want to use the humanoid to kill it, as you'll see in a minute. And what find first child does is it will try and find the humanoid instance in the character. If it can't find the humanoid, so if there isn't a humanoid for whatever reason, it's just going to ignore this. Humanoid will effectively be null, and nothing will happen, because what we need to say now is if humanoid then. So if there isn't a humanoid, as I say, if it's null, if it doesn't exist, we're not going to call this code, so the player won't die, because the code we want to call in here is humanoid.health equals 0, and this is just one of the ways to kill the player. There's a couple ways, but this is probably the easiest just for this example. Now we can close that script, and let's actually before we duplicate it, let's quickly test it. So let's anchor it, anchor the part it's on as well. Let's hit test and I think, where did we get up to? Did we do the wedge jumps? I'm not sure. Let's go just after these spheres, just test the last few levels. You should really try and test each level after you've done it, but I can't remember if I've done the wedges or not, so I'll do it again. This thin one, perfect. We could make it even thinner, but because I have my move snapped to one stud, I'm limited to one stud. But if you want to make it even thinner, just turn off your snap and you can really go for it. So we can jump over this, and if we touch it, we die. Perfect. And we should respawn, not on the checkpoint because we're going to do that in the next video, but we respawn. Perfect. Now just duplicate it, maybe move it like 10 spaces, and same with this one, maybe 10, and the final one. Perfect. And then we'll just have that checkpoint there. Perfect. Now I'm going to obviously select them all, make all the parts, make sure they're all anchored, right click, group as a folder, drag it into the 1 to 10 folder, and this is stage 5. Now what we're going to do is those sort of rows of parts you see where the player has to figure out which one can be collided with. But to do this, what I'm going to do first of all is add a part. So I'm going to have rows of 3. You could do more, but I'm just going to do 3. So I'm going to add a part which is going to be long enough to fit 3 rows. Again, holding control to expand this here on both sides equally. Otherwise I have to manually do each side, which I don't really want to do. So let's make it maybe 30. And the length I'll just make it like 6, it doesn't really matter. And what I'm going to do is just, rather than adding a new part, I'll be lazy and duplicate this one, bring it in, so we know it was 32 in length, we want to fit 3 across. Let's just, with a gap in the middle, let's just make this one 8. Line it up just so it's sort of in front of this part we've just made, and make it nice and long, maybe 26. Actually 28, 30, we'll go 30. Let's make that one colour, maybe let's go red. Then we'll duplicate it, move it across, right to the end, just so we can gauge where the middle is. And we'll maybe make this one blue, and the one in the middle, the reason I did that is just because then now it's easy to gauge where the middle is. We'll just make this one maybe green. And now just have to figure out which one is not collidable, which we'll get to in a minute. Let's duplicate this and duplicate these 3 parts again. What I've just done is made another new checkpoint, renamed it to 7. I'm going to make this one orange, and I'm going to select all these parts, anchor them all, right click them, and I'm going to group it as a folder. Once again into the 1 to 10 stages folder. This is stage 6, and now you're probably thinking, oh, how do we make these so only one can be collided with? Well, we're going to click on each one. So for the first one, I want the red one to be the one that the player has to walk across. So I'll leave that, but I'm going to click on the green and scroll down in the properties tab to can collide, and I'm going to turn that off, and same with the blue one. And now in this one, I want the blue one to be the one that can be walked across. So I'll turn off green and I'll turn off red. And that just stops can collide. If that's turned off, means any objects will fall through it, so the player cannot touch it. Now if we played just from here, you'd see if I touch the green, I die. I'm not going to let myself respawn because I don't want to be all the way back at the beginning. If I touch the blue, I die. But if I touch the red, I can go through. I'm not going to test it again. I'm sure you can trust by the example I've just shown that the blue one works and the others don't if I just walked across it there, as you can see. So now just to quickly wrap this video up, because we have made a nice couple of stages here. The last one we're going to quickly make is parts that disappear after you touch them. So what I'm going to do is add in a part, the length of this platform, as we've been doing, just basically on the similar to this sort of grey platform we've got here, just the same length. It doesn't really matter. To design how you want. Just this is actually perfect. I'm going to make it grey, and what I'm going to do is duplicate it. Actually, first of all, let's make the script. So let's add in a script into this part, which I'm in here. This is when the player touches it, we're going to make it fade away and then reappear. This is going to be a bit more complicated. I'm not going to go over the code too much in this video because I just want to show you how to sort of make the stages. We'll definitely cover code a lot more when we cover checkpoints. But just for now, just to get the bearings, I'll cover the basics. So again, we want the part, which is the script.Parent, because the parent of the script is the part. And we're going to create something called a dbounce, which is going to be set to false, db for short. This just means that the code will not keep running loads of times. the code will only run once until the part has finished going transparent, and then it will reset. So it just stops the code running loads of times, you'll see in a minute. Now when the part's been touched, we're going to call a function, so part.touched :connect function, again passing in hit because we know that's automatically passed, it's the object that touches the part. Now if db is false, then, so if the debounce is false, we're going to call some code here. Let me just remove that breakpoint. First of all, again we're going to get the character and check if the character exists, and the humanoid, exact same checks as before, using find first child again. If humanoid, exact same checks. Now the only difference is here, if we've got this far, we're going to want to make it invisible, or make it fade out and then go invisible. But before we do that, we want to set the debounce to true, so I'm going to say db equals true. That will just stop all this code running again, because we don't want it to start fading and then run again and reset, and then it just keeps resetting the fade, and it will just never go invisible. So that's why we want the debounce. Now we're going to loop for I equals 1, and I'm going to do 20 steps. You can do as many as you want. Obviously the more you go, the more demanding it is on memory, and the slower it will be. However, the more you go, the higher this number here, the smoother it will be. But anything past 20, you can't really tell the difference. What we'll say is part.transparency equals I over 20. And this is because a transparency of 1 means it's invisible, a transparency of 0 means it's visible. So let's just do some quick maths. 1, 5, 10 and 20. So 1 over 20, the transparency is 1 over 20. That is like 0.05. 5 over 20, that's 0.25. 10 over 20, that's 0.5. 15, that'd be 0.75, and 1, that'll be 20. So that'll be 20 over 20. That'll be 1. You can just sort of see how that's gradually over time getting more and more transparent. And what we're also going to do is just add in a wait 0.05 seconds, just to sort of give it time to fade. Otherwise, it'll run this at clock speed, or the speed the program's running. That will go super quick. In the blink of an eye, it'll be gone. So that just allows us to wait some time. I've done 0.05 because we've got between 1 and 20. 1/20th of a second is 0.05 seconds. If you've done like 1 and 50, I would do 1/50th of a second, or 1 and 60, 1/60th of a second, so 0.01. Just make it relative to what you've got your range as here. Now, when it's gone invisible, we want it so the player cannot collide. We want to turn can collide off, as we just saw with the previous objects we just made, so the player falls through it. Part.canCollide equals false. Now we'll wait 2 seconds before we reset it, so part.canCollide equals true. And we want to set the transparency back to 0, and then we can set our debounce to false because we're ready to go again. So these last 4 lines here just reset the part so it can be touched again, because we don't want it to go invisible forever. Now let's quickly test this. So let's anchor our part here and just click play here, because we don't want to duplicate loads of parts and then it turns out the script doesn't work, because then we've got loads of scripts to fix. So we touch it, it goes invisible, and we fall through it. Perfect. And just make sure it reappears as well. It's always good to test every scenario you can. So let's touch it, give it 2 seconds, and it reappears. Perfect. And we can do it again, and it should reappear. And it does, yeah. Perfect. So now I'm going to duplicate that part, bring it a bit closer. I might even make the grey a bit darker, actually, if we wanted to go fancy. And again. And again. And duplicate the checkpoint, drag it to the end. This will now be checkpoint 8. And let's make the colour red. There we go. We did just get enough colours for... Actually, we can't do red. We've already used it. Well, we can reuse it, but I'd rather not. I want to hold off the reusing as much as we possibly can. Let's go for this funky colour. We've already used that. Wow. Okay, we've really... Let's go for this one. I'm sure. Yeah, there we go. That'll do. And now let's select all these parts. Just right-click them. Group as a folder. Let me close some stuff up in here. drag that folder into stages 1 to 10, and this is stage 7. Perfect. And you can sort of see how it's starting to come along now. I can't remember if all these are anchored. Yeah, they are. Yeah, you can sort of see how all this is coming along. We've got our stages that we're going to work with in this series. Obviously, now that you've seen all the sort of basic types, go ahead, go wild, make all the stages you want. In the next video, we're going to work on the checkpoint system. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then. If you have any questions about this video, please leave a comment in the description and I'll try and get back to everyone. Alternatively, if you do need direct help with your programming and it'd be easier for us just to see the code, it's worth joining our Discord server and asking in there. Thanks for watching everyone, and goodbye. Hey everyone, today we're going to cover the checkpoint system. Now before we get straight into the scripting, I just want to cover a few key points which you might like in your game. First of all, sort of a necessary feature really, we want each checkpoint to have a text label, because what good is it just having a coloured platform? You don't know what stage you're on without the leader stat GUI. So we want a number to be on each stage, so this one would be number 2, number 3, this one will have number 4 on it, and so on, just so we know what stage we're on easily. So to do that, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to actually delete this spawn location that we added on the first stage, because that was only temporary. We are going to sort that out today. Under checkpoint 1, I'm going to add in a SurfaceGui. And on this SurfaceGui, I'm going to add in a text label. The reason we use a SurfaceGui is because it allows us to put user interface on a part surface. Now you'll see that this text label is on the wrong side. We want it to be on the top where we're standing. We don't want it to be on the side. So if we click on the SurfaceGui in the properties panel, if we scroll down, you will see where it says face, it's at front at the minute. We want that to be on top. And if for some reason the top is underneath, just go from top to bottom. It might just mean you've got your part rotated the wrong way, or maybe you've scaled it incorrectly and it's on the side, and it's just pick the one that's on the top. It might take some trial and error if your part has been rotated or scaled strangely. Now I'm going to click on the text label, and first of all give it a transparent background, because we don't want it to be white, we want to see the colour of the part. I'm then going to make the size 1, 0, 1, 0. This just means scale of 1, 1 in the x and y, and a scale of 0, 0 in the x and y offset, and an offset of 0, 0 in the x and y. The offset, we don't need to worry about that, especially with Surface GUI, because the part sizes are constant. It's not like typical graphical user interface where screen sizes vary with different devices. We don't really need to worry about it. Now if we scroll down, I will make this text, probably make it white, and I'm going to hit text scaled and turn that on. I'm also going to make the text just the number 1. Now as you'll see, even with text scaled, it still looks a bit small. So what we can do is go to the Surface GUI, and underneath sizing right at the bottom where it's on pixels per stud, if we change this from 50 to 25, it will double the size. However, it will lose quality, because what this is saying, obviously one stud, that is a ROBLOX unit, which looks, I think, this sort of width, as you can see here. That is one stud, I believe. Yeah, I think that's one stud. This is all new. I've not actually played around with this, but it's quite nice. But back to what I was saying, yeah, this just means for every stud, every ROBLOX stud, there's 25 pixels. So obviously, if we had this 100, this is a really high definition, high quality text. But if we put this to maybe 15, it's a lot bigger, but it's lower quality. So you need to choose whether you want to sacrifice quality or size. In my case, I'm going to sacrifice quality. If you wanted to still have high quality and a large size, you'd be better off using decals and creating images. So you'd have a stage 1 image, a stage 2 image, and that way you can set the image to the size of the part, import it to ROBLOX, set it as a decal, put the decal on the image. It's much more work, but it would look nicer. Now just before I rotate this number 1 around, I actually want to rotate the checkpoint, because what you'll see is this blue arrow. If we use the move tool and click on the checkpoint, the blue arrow is facing this way and this way. Now the blue arrow is the direction the player will also face when they spawn in. So for example, let me quickly add in under model a spawn location again, just here, and you'll see the blue arrow is facing the same way as the checkpoint blue arrow. If I now hit test and play, you'll see we are facing this direction. Now obviously when I spawn in, I want to be facing towards the stage. So I want to rotate this 90 degrees along the green rotation here, so that the blue arrow, when we hit move, is facing this way. And that means that when we hit play, we are facing the actual stage now. So let's mimic that in our checkpoint. Let's rotate our checkpoint so the blue arrow will be facing this way, which means we need to go clockwise 90 degrees, like so. Now you'll see that our number one still isn't facing the right way. But now that we've adjusted this, if we quickly click on it, you'll see blue arrows that way, so we know that we're going to spawn facing the right direction. So what we can do is click on the text label and change the rotation to, we want it to be 90 degrees because we want it to be this way. And you can sort of see how that works a bit more. So what I'll do is just do that once more. So I'll duplicate the SurfaceGui, put it into the number 2. And once again, I need to actually rotate number 2 because it's not facing the right way. So rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, and this, I need to go into the text label and change this text to the number 2 because it's stage 2. You can also play around with how the text looks. I'm not going to do that just for the sake of saving time, but do feel free to play around and make it look how you want. Now let me just quickly rotate all of the stages. I'm going to have to do it individually because if we select them all then rotate, we're going to get some weird stuff going on. So let me just quickly rotate all of these. Let me turn on the rotate snap under model and set that to 90 degrees, which I suggest you do if you haven't already. And I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees, each one anti-clockwise. I do believe each one needs rotating. If not, I'll correct them after when we test everything. But I'm pretty sure everything needs rotating 90 degrees anti-clockwise because we duplicated, if you remember last video, we duplicated each checkpoint. So they are all going to have that same, I believe, y-axis rotation. Now, actually we can check this by just dragging the SurfaceGui on each, and if it's facing the stage, then we know it works. The yellow one's a bit hard to see. I might actually add an outline. Yeah, perfect. I'm just going to delete the SurfaceGui from number 2 quickly, just because under the text label on the first checkpoint, I want to make the text stroke transparency, I can't speak, to 0. And what that does is just add a little outline. We could go better, we could add in, there's some UI sort of designs we could add in a gradient, we could add in corners, so that's not really, that doesn't apply to text. We could add in, the one I'm looking for is here somewhere, UI stroke, which is where we could make the thickness 5 and we've got a nice thick stroke, which is what I'm going to actually do. Now you might be thinking, if you have gone ahead and made loads of stages, oh now we've got to duplicate this, drag this in each part. But no, we don't. I'm going to show you a quick way of doing this. I'm not going to explain it too much because we are going to write some code, and this code is all, it's going to be multiple lines of code on one line, which you can do, so it just looks a bit confusing. So under view, we're going to go to command bar. Now I will actually put this at the top of the description under a resources header. So if you go in the description, you can copy and paste this command bar, assuming you've named everything exactly how I have. Workspace, checkpoints, your number system's the same as mine. You've got the SurfaceGui, the text label. You don't actually need the text, just the SurfaceGui named exactly how it is as on my screen. Then it will work for you. What we need to do is, first of all, clone the SurfaceGui, and for each checkpoint we're going to paste the cloned SurfaceGui into it. So first of all, say local clone equals workspace.Checkpoints.1, or we're going to have to use square brackets, then quotation marks and 1. Just because we've got the SurfaceGui in our first stage, make sure it's in the first stage and the first stage only. Now we will say dot SurfaceGui, and that's it. Colon clone. No, we'll just do that. We don't need to do the colon clone. Now we're going to do a space, and we'll say for I, v in pairs, workspace.Checkpoints, GetChildren, do if v is a open brackets quotation marks part close quotation marks close brackets, then clone, then we'll say local, then local new GUI equals clone clone. I know that doesn't make sense, my naming system here, but don't worry about it. newGui.Parent equals and newGui.TextLabel.Text equals v.Name. End and enter. Now I do recommend you just go copy that from the description, because otherwise you are going to end up with probably errors if you even do one thing wrong here, and it's very hard to sort of diagnose errors from the command line because all the code is on one line. Now what you'll see this is done, let me just quickly go to view and close the command bar again. Now what you'll see this is done is it's actually made our text for each checkpoint automatically and done the numbers. Now under number 1 you'll see we have 2 surface GUIs. We can just delete one of them. It's because we've cloned everything, so it's just that first one, because we already had one in there, it's just added another. Now the way this has worked is what we've done is we've created a clone variable with the surface GUI we made, and then we've looped through each checkpoint in the checkpoints folder, and if the item we're looking at is a part, then we're cloning the GUI and setting its parent to the checkpoint, and then we're setting the text label's text to the name of the checkpoint, which if you followed my numbering system, you'll see why we did that in the first video now, because each text is a number. It's just easy, we don't have to do it manually. Obviously, every time you if you want to add a new stage now, you will have to do it manually, unless you make loads of stages at once and duplicate it all again, but that is up to you. If you want to like bulk make stages, it might be better just to do it in the command prompt again. But now I'm going to go to view and close the command bar. Now something you will see is if I hit test and play here, just so I spawn on the checkpoint, when I die, it takes a few seconds for me to spawn in. Now when people are playing obbies, this is something to keep in mind. They are going to probably die a lot, and having to wait 3 seconds before you respawn isn't very fun. So if you want to keep user retention, if you want to keep people playing, I recommend you actually change the respawn time, or maybe even disable it. To do that, you can go under players, and where it says respawn time, at the minute it's on 5 seconds. I'm just going to make it 0 so you respawn instantly, and you'll see now when I die, I respawn pretty much instantly. Maybe you don't want that, maybe you want it like half a second, you can do that, but I'm going to make it as instant as I can, because who wants to wait 5 seconds after dying in an obby when you're probably going to be dying a lot? That time adds up. You know, if you've died 10 times, you've been waiting 50 seconds of respawn time. What a waste. Okay, now we can actually get into this system. So first of all, I'm going to create a leader stat script. So we want one server script to have all our leader stats, just to keep everything nice and neat and in one place. So under server script service, I'm going to click the add button and add in a script. I'm going to right click and rename this to leader stats. Now if you don't know what leader stats are, I do recommend you check out my video on them. I believe the video is a little bit outdated. It covers everything, but it was an old video, so it might not explain things very well. But it does cover sort of the fundamental, like what is the leader stats basically. Anyway, in here we want to write code which will create a new leader stats folder, and it will create our stage value. So whenever the player joins the game, we want to do this. So game.players.player added :connect function player. Now this function here is called whenever a player joins the game, and it automatically passes in the player that joined as an argument. Now what we can say is local leader stats equals instance.new folder and it's going to be inside of the player. So this is creating a new folder inside of the player. The comma player just means it's parent. So this is the parent, so it's going to be inside the player. And we'll say leaderstats.name equals, and it's very important you spell this exactly how I spell it, leaderstats, no spaces and no capital letters. Even the first letter has to be lowercase, because this is the Roblox default for generating the leader stats, which is the sort of display you see top right of every Roblox game, or almost every Roblox game, if they have them. Now let's create our stage variable. So local stage, this is going to be instance.new. It's going to be an int value, because we're not going to have decimal stages. We're only going to have integer, a whole number stages. And the parent will be the leader stats. We want this to be within the leader stats folder. Now the name for this, I'm just going to call it stage. You don't have to call it stage. If you want to call it level or something, do go for it. Just bear that in mind if you're calling it something else. When I refer to stage in any script throughout the series, you will call it level or whatever you've called it. Don't copy stage if you're not calling it stage. Now we'll say stage.value equals 1. That's because by default we want the starting stage to be stage 1. It doesn't really make sense to start on stage 0. That doesn't sound right. But if you want to do that, just set that to 0. If you want to start on stage 5 for some reason, say it's 5. But I want my default starting stage to be stage 1. That's it for the leaderstat script for now. And now if we was to hit test and play, I'm not going to spawn in, you'll see we've got stage 1 next to our name. So next we need to create a script inside each checkpoint, which is going to call code whenever the checkpoint is touched, which will update the stage number. This is going to be somewhat similar to the code we've done for our kill brick. So what I'm going to do is under stage 2, not stage 1, stage 2, I'm going to add in a script. The reason we're not doing it under stage 1 is because that is our default, that's our spawning stage. There are no previous stages, so it doesn't make sense to do it in stage 1, because no player is going to go from stage 0 to stage 1, unless of course you're starting at stage 0. In this script, we want to first, actually it makes sense just to go and copy our kill brick code. So let's go find our kill bricks, which we made in the last video, which is just here, and copy this code. I'm going to just select all of it, copy it, and paste it into our checkpoint script that we're making, because it doesn't make sense to rewrite it all. This is the code. If you didn't get the kill brick from the last video, this is the code here. Now we are going to make a couple of changes regarding, rather than the humanoid, we want to get the player, because we want to check the leader stats, and the leader stats are within the player. So what we'll do is get rid of all this humanoid stuff and just say local player equals game dot players dot get get player from character, and we're going to pass in char, which is our character. If player then, so we're getting the player from the character. This is a built-in function that Roblox allows you to manipulate or to use. If the player exists, then we're going to get their leader stats. So local leader stats equals player dot. Actually, we'll use find first child find first child and then leader stats. Again, spelled exactly like this. Spelling is so important when it comes to programming. Next, we'll say if leader stats. Then we have discussed find first child in the previous video, I believe, but it just it's going to look, and if it doesn't exist, it will stop the whole program crashing. It will just set leader stats to nil or null. I don't know if it's nil or null. It's one of the two, and it just won't exist. So that's why we say if leader stats then. So if leader stats does exist, then we know the player has leader stats. So what we're going to do next is compare our stage to the name of the checkpoint. So obviously this is the name of this checkpoint is checkpoint 2. It's just the number 2. That's the name. It's 2. So we want to check if our stage is 1, then we're going to set the stage to 2. If that makes sense, because it doesn't make sense to set your stage to level 2 if you're on stage 0, because then you've skipped a stage. So you want to just do that check. So say if leader stats dot stage dot value is equal to, and we're going to use the toNumber function and pass in part.name -1 then. And what this just means is if the leader stat stage is, let's say 1 and this is 2, then it will work. If not, it's not. It's just a check to ensure that we're on the previous stage. Our current stage is the stage before this one that they've just touched, if that makes sense. The to number just converts the name to a number, because obviously the name is a number to us, but the program recognizes it as a string, because technically this is a string. The number 2, because it's a name, is a string, so we have to convert that to a number. And we can only do that because we recognize it is clearly a number. There's no letters. If you had letters in it, it won't work. That is why we went for 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of checkpoint 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, if this is the case, then we can say leaderstats.stage.value equals to number part.name. And if you wanted, we could make variables for these just to clean up the code, but I'm not going to bother. This just makes this their new current stage. And we can close this script. Now we need to put this script in each of the checkpoints. Again, we can just duplicate it, but if you've got loads of checkpoints, it's going to take time. We don't want it to be in checkpoint 1 because we're going to handle that checkpoint in a new script, which you're going to create in a second. So once again, I'm going to go view, command bar, get our command back up, and the clone, again, this one will be in the description. Click enter. Has it done it? Yeah, it's done it for all of them. So I'll just close up the command bar again. I need my output back. Clear that. So obviously we don't need it. We don't need both of them in number 2, just one. And we don't need it in checkpoint 1. And let me just make sure it's gone into all our checkpoints. It has. Perfect. Now, again, we've still not made the respawn system, so you respawn on the part. So let me just play here above this checkpoint, just so I can quickly show you. As we jump across, our stage goes up to stage 2. Let's try and get to stage 3. I won't test all of these. I'll just do it the first 4 or so. Stage 3, and then we should go up to stage 4. There we go, perfect. And you sort of see where we're coming from. Anyway, now we need to create the checkpoint handler script, is what I'm going to call it. So under server script service, I'm going to add in another script, and I will right click and rename this to checkpoint handler. And in here, we are going to deal with spawning the player on the checkpoints. So this is where we really piece everything together. This is sort of the final piece to the puzzle. We do need to add one little thing to the leader stat script, but this is sort of the final piece. This is what brings it all together. So first of all, we need to get the replicated storage service. So we just say replicated storage equals game : get service replicated storage. That way we can just easily access replicated storage. And we also want the run service, which we'll see why in a minute. Run service equals game : get service and run service. Right, now we're going to use something you may or may not have seen before. It's a little bit more advanced in the whole Roblox scripting scene, but you might have seen it, you might not have. We're going to type in _G, uppercase G, dot, and we're going to call the function player loaded equals function, passing in a player. Now you might not have seen this before, this might be new to you. What this means is basically we're creating a global function that is accessible to all server scripts using the _G table. So this _G is a table of global variables and functions. So what we've done is just made a brand new global function called player loaded, and it takes the player as a parameter. Now we're using this global table because we're going to, in the leader stat script, fire this function, and this prevents us having to use a remote event, for example, to fire a client just to fire back to the server. It just makes sense to do all this using the global table. I wouldn't put everything in the global table, only the things you really need global, because it can become memory inefficient. But less on that and more on the checkpoints. So we need to get our current stage. So local current stage, this is obviously going to be equal to the player's current stage. So player.leaderstats.stage.value. The dot value just allows us to get the number. I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'm trying to speed it up a little bit. Local stage part. This is going to be the checkpoint corresponding to the player's stage. So checkpoints folder, find first child, current stage. So if you're on stage 3, we're going to look for stage 3, for checkpoint 3. I just realised we've not created the checkpoints folder. That would actually help. So right at the top, I'm going to say checkpoints folder equals, and this is going to be equal to workspace : wait for child checkpoints. Now, the reason we're using wait for child is because we want to wait for the checkpoint folders to load, folder to load in. So this checkpoints folder will not be assigned. No more code is going to run until the checkpoints folder exists, until this checkpoints folder here has loaded into the game. Nothing else is going to happen. That just prevents errors. If we said .checkpoints, it may not have loaded by then, and then the checkpoints folder doesn't exist, and we get loads of errors later on in the code. So obviously this is the folder of all the checkpoints. Now what we need to do is just quickly go into Home, Game Settings, Avatar, and we need to make sure our avatar type is R15. Just so we can use the humanoid root part. So we can say player.character.humanoid root part, spelled exactly like this, dot cframe, spelled exactly like that, equals stage part dot cframe plus vector3 dot new 0, comma, I'm going to go 3, comma 0. And what this does is it sets the position of the player's character to the checkpoint with a displacement of 3 studs on the y-axis. This prevents the player's character spawning inside the part and sort of getting stuck. So it spawns 3 studs above it and then it falls on top of the part. It just stops it getting stuck inside the part. Stage part.cframe, that's sort of think of it as the position of the part, the stage part. I'm calling it stage part. It's the checkpoint that relates to their current stage. Now, what you'll see, depending on how fast things run, you may or may not see this. But if I go to stage 2 and then die and go to respawn, we don't spawn on the checkpoint. And the reason for that is because this is all happening so quick. The part isn't having time to sort of register. It's not having time to, when we respawn, to find that C frame, if that makes sense. So we need to give it all it needs is 1 frame just to allow everything to load from memory correctly. And just wait 1 frame, what we need is run service .heartbeat wait, just like that. And this will just wait 1 frame for the part to be in memory and be retrieved from memory. So if we now hit, we don't even need to use play here anymore. Actually we do need to use play here, because under leader stats, we just need to quickly add in player.characterAdded : connect function, passing in the character. So this is a function similar to player added that's called every time the player's character spawns in. So if you die and the character respawns, this any code here will be ran, and it just automatically passes in the character as an argument. And under here we just need to say _g dot player loaded. Make sure you spell it exactly how you spell your function in the checkpoint handler, passing in, of course, the player, and this will just call our function. Now we don't even need to use play here anymore. We can just use play, and you'll see we spawn in on stage 1. We can jump across, hit stage 2. Let's say we're going to stage 3. Okay, that works. I'll just go up to stage 4, and oh no, we've missed a jump. Let's see, when we spawn in, do we spawn back on stage 3? Yes, we do. We're facing the right way as well. And let's just test one more. Let's go for stage 5. We'll test as well with the kill bricks. So we're on stage 5, we die to a kill brick, and we spawn back on stage 5. Perfect. Now, we've not made saving yet. We're going to do that in a couple of episodes' time, because there's just a couple more things I want to add before we save, because it just makes more sense to wait. But that is it for this video. So I know it was a bit longer, and I do apologise, but I hope you found it helpful. In the next video, we're going to look at skip stages. So if you get stuck, you can pay like say 10 Robux and you can skip to the next stage. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching and goodbye. In this video, we are going to look at making a skip stage system for our obby. So let's just get straight into it. First of all, we want to create a button just on the screen that the player can click, and it'll prompt them with a Gamepass purchase, and they'll be able to skip the stage with Robux. So let's go under Starter GUI and add in a Screen GUI. A screen GUI is just a sort of, well, it is what it says really. It is a GUI which appears on the screen. You can put multiple UI elements in the screen GUI. So let's click add and add in a text button. If you'd like an image button or which shows an image, you can go for that. It's the exact same concept. You just add an image. So you could go to add an image button, and add an image in here. If you want to learn a bit more about how to use user interface, please check out our mini user interface series. Now I'm going to rename this text button to skip stage, and I'll drag it to where I want it. So I want it on the left of the screen because that just makes sense, doesn't it? I'm just going to make the buttons size of 0.10, 0.10 actually, just because what that will do is it will stop the button staying the same size. As if we go onto a different screen size, it will stay the same size. Again, more on that on our little mini series I did. You can check that out, the link will be in the description. Obviously, your user interface, play around with it how you want, but I'm going to make it 200 by 69 because I'm trying to get that 70. Okay, 200 by 70. I'll just make the text say skip stage. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. I'm just going to play around with some of the UI elements and I'll get back to you in a second. There we go, I'm pretty happy with that. So what I've done is I've just changed the background color to a light blue, made the text white, changed the font to Fredoka 1. That's the one I like. I've added a UI corner with the radius 0.20. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty good. Now what we need to do, just before we do any scripting, we actually need to create our developer product, because we need a developer product to actually pay Robux for the skip stage. Again, I do have a video on developer products, so if you want to learn more about how they work, go check that video out. But what you want to do, head over to create.roblox.com. We're going to head down, first of all, view as yourself, or if you're on a group, you want to click this and select the group. But I'm not in a group. I'm not making this game as part of a group. It's part of my own profile. So I just want myself selected. I'm going to go down to creations. And I'm going to find the game we're working on, which is the first one here for me. And I'm just going to click on it. Next, what we'll do is scroll down to monetization. And under monetization, we want to click on developer products. I'm going to hit create a developer product. And in here we can upload an image if we'd like. I'm not going to give it an image because I don't have one on hand. And I'll just call it skip stage. You can give it a description if you want. Again, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make it 15 Robux. I think that's pretty reasonable for a skip stage. And I'm going to hit create developer product. Now that we've actually got the skip stage product amongst all the other products I've made over the course of the YouTube channel, we can hit the three dots and hit copy asset ID. You should get a message that prompts asset ID has been copied successfully, in which case we can go back to Roblox. Now what I'm going to do, just so we don't sort of forget this ID, I'm going to, in the command bar that we looked into last video, if you don't see it, go to view command bar. I'm just going to right click and paste the ID that I've just copied and just enter, just so it's in this chat, just so I've got a record of it. Now what I'll do is I will go under the skip stage. We actually need to create a local script in here. In this local script, we want to get the marketplace service. So we'll say marketplace, actually that would be one word, marketplace service equals game : get service marketplace service. This just gets the marketplace service. We'll get the player is game.players.local player. We can do this local player because we're in a local script. If we're in a server script, a normal script, we can't do game.players.local player. It has to be on the local script because the local script runs on the player, so it knows what the player is. The server script won't know what player we're trying to specify. Next, we're going to get our product ID, which we've pasted into the command bar. If you don't have it copied anymore, just go back into your output. Because we put it in the command bar, we can double click it and copy it again. And now we're going to create another debounce, which we've explored in the obstacles video. I'll set that to false. When we made the disappearing parts. So if you want a bit more information on the debounce, go back to the disappearing parts timestamp in the creating the obstacles video, which I believe is the first, or episode part 2 of the series. Now what we'll do is call a function when the button's clicked. So we'll do script.parent, because script.parent, that's our skip stage button. dot mouse button one click colon connect function, and we're not going to pass anything into this function. Now again, we'll do if debounce is false, then just doing our debounce stuff, which we've introduced previously. Now what we need to do is actually check if the stage is less than the number of checkpoints in the game, because we don't want to prompt them to skip the stage if they're on the last stage of the game. So if you've got 100 stages and they're on stage 100, there's no next stage to skip to, so we don't want to prompt them to skip a stage if they can't skip a stage. So we'll say if player.leaderstats.stage.value is less than, and then we're going to use the hash key, the hashtag workspace.Checkpoints :GetChildren with this capitalization exactly. And this will just check if the stage is less than the number of checkpoints. That's what this hashtag means. The hashtag just means number of. So the GetChildren, this will get every single checkpoint in our checkpoints folder. So there's 8 stages in the game, there's 8 checkpoints. If and this hashtag just gets the number of them, so the number 8. So if our stage value is less than 8, then we want to prompt the product purchased. So to do that, we'll say marketplace service :prompt product purchase, passing in the player and our product ID. And this prompts the player with the purchase. Otherwise, we'll drop down, do a backspace to dedent a little bit, and just say else, and we'll reset the debounce. Now we're not going to reset the debounce after we've prompted the product purchase, because this means they could, well, it opens the possibility, if their computer's fast enough, to spam click the buy button while it's processing, and it might skip more than one stage at a time, which we don't want. So we only want to reset the debounce once the product has finished being purchased. And to do that, we'll say marketplace service. Underneath this whole thing, we're going to call another function, .prompt product purchase finished, :connect function, and in here a few arguments are automatically passed in. So as a parameter, we want to add the player ID, the product ID, and is purchased. It doesn't have to be called all this exactly. I'm going to name it is purchased. It's just a Boolean state which tells us whether or not the product has been purchased. It doesn't matter to us whether or not it has. All that matters is that the product has been finished. So whether it's been cancelled or has it been purchased, it doesn't matter, because we just want to reset the debounce. So say db equals false, and this just resets the debounce. We just have to pass these in because they're automatically passed in as arguments, so we have to have them as parameters. Now we can close the local script, and we can actually test this. If we hit play, it won't do anything yet, but if we hit skip stage, it will prompt us with our Gamepass. It should say buy skip stage, because that's what we've called it. 15 Robux, the amount of Robux I set. It doesn't do anything, but we can purchase it. It doesn't reset our debounce either, and the reason for that is because we haven't returned any state as to whether or not the marketplace service, the product, has been finished purchasing or not. We have to do that in a server script, which we're going to do next. Now, in our checkpoint handler, we want to add some code to actually do something with this product. Underneath the run service, we want to get the players as well, which is game::get_service player service, not player service, sorry, just players, and the marketplace service, which is game::get_service marketplace service. We also want the ID, so I'll say product ID equals, and paste in our product ID. Now what we need to do is call a function when the receipt is being processed. Now to do this, we'll say marketplace service dot process receipt equals function, and in here we automatically, the receipt info is passed in, so we need receipt info as a parameter. And this is a function that will be called whenever the player purchases the product. Now we need to get the player from the user ID that's been passed in as a part of the receipt info. So we'll say local player equals players :get player get player by user ID, receipt info dot player ID, with capitalization exactly like this. So I want the P capitalized and I want the I capitalized. The D needs to be lowercase, it has to be like this. Now we'll just make sure the player exists. So if not player, then return enum.productPurchaseDecision.not processed yet. So if the player does not exist, we want to return the decision that the product has not been processed. And of course, this returning this product purchase decision, returning that, will call this function here because the product has been finished being dealt with. So this gets called when we return a product purchase decision. Now underneath this, we want another if statement. We want to check if the product ID on the receipt is equal to the product ID of our product. So if receipt info dot product ID, again exact same capitalization formula. So capital P, capital I, lowercase d equals product ID, which is the one that we've stored up here as a variable. Then we want to increment the stage value, so player.leaderstats.stage.value plus equals 1. And then we want to load the player onto the correct checkpoint. Now luckily we have a function for this that we've already created in the last video. So say _g dot player loaded. And we can call that passing in the player. Now under here we can return enum.productPurchaseDecision.purchaseGranted, which just returns the decision that the product was processed and the purchase was granted. And that is it, that's all we had to do. Okay, so I'm going to hit test and play and just test that everything's working. So I'll get to stage 2 myself, and I'm actually thinking stage 2 is a bit difficult, so I'm going to hit skip stage. It prompts us, I'm going to buy it, and as you see, it actually teleports me to stage 3. And now if I die, just to make sure we respawn on the right stage, yep, we do, perfect. Now let's keep going. I'll get to stage 4 and I'm going to test it again just because I'm not feeling too confident with these parts. It'd help if I click the right button, there we go. And stage 5. And when you're testing developer products, you are never charged in Roblox Studio. It's not actually reset our debounce there. So that one's glitched out a little bit. So I'll have a quick look at that. But, oh no, it has, sorry, it's just taking a little while to respond. If I just click that. It looks like the Roblox, it's just taking a little while for it to respond. Okay, so if we die, so it does it once. Okay, so if we click cancel, it looks like it's not working. So we skip stage, do I click it again? So it looks like our debounce isn't resetting. Alright, I'll just have a quick look at that. So a bit of debugging, what I'm going to do is just print our debounce in here. Every time the product purchase finished is called, just so I know whether it's resetting it or not. So we've got an issue here, connect. Oh, it's because I've spelt connect wrong in the function, that's why. Okay, I thought it was a bit funny that that wasn't working. I've spelt connect wrong. Right, let's try this again. That's what programming is all about, just testing stuff. I'll do the exact same things as stage 2. Now I'll skip. There we go. Okay, stage 3. Now if I die, I should respawn back at stage 3. And then I'll just, what I'm going to do now is just spam the button, and you'll see we only skip one stage. Skip again. Okay, now it's actually working. So yeah, I spelled connect wrong, that's why it wasn't working. Perfect. Okay, brilliant, that is it. That's all we had to do this video. In the next one, actually I'll just quickly check that the last stage doesn't do anything. Now it shouldn't prompt us. Perfect, and it doesn't. Yeah, so in the next video we will look at the DataStore. Actually no, that's a lie, we're going to look at a progress bar, which will visually demonstrate to you what level you're on and how many levels you have left to go. It's just, you don't have to follow that one, it's just a little bit of neat UI that I'm going to add because it looks nice. So I'll see you then everyone, I hope you found this video helpful, thanks for watching and goodbye. In this video, we will be making a progress bar to graphically represent how far into the obby the player is. To get started, we'll go to Starter GUI and we will add a frame to the screen GUI. We will rename this to progress bar. This will be part of the progress bar that hasn't been filled yet. So whatever, when we fill the progress bar, you think there's going to be a background and then there's going to be a color which overlays, which may be green for example, and it will get filled. So as you can see, as we complete more levels, this is going to get filled and the background will be this white color here. I'm going to give it the size, it's going to be a bit random because I've already predefined it, 0.407, comma 0, comma 0.038, comma 0. Bit of a random size, but this is one that I used in my Dimension Obby game. And I'm now going to drag it into the center here at the bottom of the screen. I might actually make it a little bit thicker, just so we've got a bit more at the bottom. Next, we'll add another frame to the screen GUI, in fact to the progress bar. I'm going to right click and rename this frame to just bar. I'll give it a blue background color to match our skip stage button. So in fact what I'll do is I'll go to our button and copy the background color free and then paste it into our bar frame. I'll give it the size 1010, just so it matches the same size as its parent, the progress bar frame. Now you can see as it fills how it would sort of start looking. Next we'll add a text label to the bar frame, and I'm going to rename this to indicator. This will display in text what stage the player is on and how many levels are in the obby. I will give it the size 1,0,1,0 to match again the scale of the progress bar frame, which is its parent. This text label should be in the progress bar, not the actual bar. So these two should be separate. I just accidentally made this a child. It should be a child of the progress bar, not the bar, just like you see here. Next, I'm going to scroll down to the text and make sure the text color free is white. And I'm going to make the text say... Actually, I will give the text a stroke as well, just because you can't see it at the minute on a white background. So by giving it a stroke, it allows us to see it there. I'll make this say progress, 0 out of 0. Just by default, that's going to be the value I give it. I might actually increase the text size. I'll click text scaled, and I'll just play around with the font and stuff. So what I've done is I've given it that Fredoka 1 font, which I did with the skip stage button. I've made the text scale, and I've added a UI text size constraint, which allows me to give it a maximum size of, I've put 32, and a minimum size of 12. This just means that when we scale the screen size, it does resize the text, but only down to a minimum of 12. We will be changing this text in a local script. So let's now create a local script inside of the progress bar frame. So let's add a local script. And to get started in the script, I'll say local player equals game.players.local player, because we want to get the player and store it in a variable. Next, I'll say local leader stats equals player, wait for child, and then leader stats, all in lowercase. This will get the leader stats and store it in a variable. We use wait for child because we want to wait for the leader stats folder to exist within the player. Otherwise, we might get some errors thrown and the game might not work how we want it to. Next, we'll say local indicator equals script.parent.indicator. Next, we want to get the bar, so we'll say local bar equals script.parent.bar. And now we want to get the maximum number of stages in the game. So local max stages equals hashtag workspace.Checkpoints : GetChildren. This will get the number of checkpoints in the game. This means the number of stages. And just remember, hashtag means the number of. I'm just using local here because I find it good habit to use local variables in local scripts, just because they can't be global in the first place. But we don't actually need these locals here. It's a good habit to use local variables or to define a variable as local within your local script, just because they can't be global. Their only option is to be local. Not everyone will have it though. Some people won't use the local, but because it's a local script, I like to put the local keyword before each variable identifier, variable name. Next we'll say while wait 1 do, and this will repeat any code in here every second for as long as the program runs. The reason I'm using a second is because I don't want to update the progress bar every frame or every single cycle of the code, because that gets quite demanding. It's just unnecessary work. We don't need to update a progress frame every single, millionth of a second, 1,000th of a second. We can just check it every second. We don't need to do it all the time. Now here's where we want to resize the frame. So we can say bar.size equals udim2.new, that's capital U, capital D, in brackets 1 divided by, open brackets, max stages divided by leader stats dot stage dot value, close brackets, comma 0, 1, 0, close brackets again. This changes the size of the bar to show how many stages the player has completed. Like we saw earlier when I was changing the blue bit, udim2.new creates a brand new two-dimensional value relative to a scale and offset for an x and y axis. So our first item here, in this first parameter, our first argument is the x scale. The second argument is the x offset. The third argument is the y scale, and the fourth argument is the y offset. This allows us to change the size in terms of offset and scale. This value for the x scale sets the value of the scale to 1 divided by the number of stages the player has completed as a fraction of the total stages in the game. For example, say leaderstats.stage.value was 32 and the maximum number of stages in the game is 80. The bar's x scale value will be equal to 1 over 80 over 32, which is the same as 32 over 80, which equals 0.4. So the x scale value will be 0.4 or 40% filled. Next we can say indicator.text equals, and then we want progress, colon, leaderstats.stage.value, / max stages. The ... is just how we can append a variable's value to a string. And this sets the indicator text to the number of stages completed out of the number of stages in the game. Okay, and now we can test it. So let's hit test and play, and we'll keep an eye on our output and make sure there's no errors. Nothing yet. It says progress 1 out of 8, so that's perfect because we have 8 stages. So let's do some jumping. We'll go over to stage 2, and it says 2 out of 8. Now, for some reason, the size hasn't changed of the progress bar. Let's have a look at why that could be. There's no errors in the output, but the size isn't changing. So let's have a look. Okay, so the reason that the size is changing, but the reason we can't see it is because our indicator text has a background and it's placing it over the top of our progress bar. So we need to go to the background color 3 of our indicator text and make the background transparency 1. And now we should be able to hit test and play and be able to see the progress bar work. There we go, so it says 1 out of 8. Let's do some jumping. There we go, it should start, 2 out of 8. So it's not instant, obviously it does wait that second. If you want it to be instant, you can remove the 1 in the while wait do, and then it will just do it. I think the default's like 0.03 seconds. But you can see that it does start to work really well. And if we skip stage as well, it should work. Yep, 6 out of 8, perfect. So that is the progress bar, that's it. We could add a couple more things just to make it look nice. So we could add, for example, a UI corner to each of our elements. So the progress bar, the bar, and the indicator. But that is it for this video, everyone. I hope you found it helpful. In the next video, we will make a data store system to save and load our data. That is the last video I have planned for the series. If you have any more suggestions for this series, please let me know by filling out the video suggestion form in the description. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. In this video, I'll show you how to save each player's data, so when they rejoin the game, they spawn back on the same stage they started with. To do this, we'll use Roblox's DataStore service. Let's create a script in SurfaceGui and rename it to DataStore. Before we start coding, let's enable Studio access to API services. Let's go to Home, Game Settings, Security, and we want to find Enable Studio Access to API Services. Enable it and click Save. This will allow us to communicate with the DataStore service. It's very important you do enable this. If you do not enable it, DataStore will not work in your game. Next, let's open up our DataStore script and start coding. I'm going to remove the print hello world, and I'm going to start by getting this DataStore service. So DataStore service equals game::get service DataStore service. Next, we need to create a new DataStore. To do this, we'll say DataStore equals DataStore service :get DataStore. And in here, you want to put your DataStore name. I'm going to call it DataStore name 0. Changing this name will actually create a new save for the player. If you want to reset the player's data, increase it by 1 or 2 or 3. If you want to go back to an old set of data, just change the name to the old name. So let's say I have data stored and DataStore name 0. I've got 50 points on this DataStore. And then we change to DataStore 1. I've now got 0 points. And let's say I then go and get 75 points, and that saves. So now on DataStore 1, I have 75 points. And if we go back to 0, I'll have 50 again. We could set a 2 and we'll have 0 again. 0, we have 50. 1 we have 75, if that makes sense. Now let's call a function whenever the player joins the game. You should know how to do this by now. Game.players.playerAdded :connect function player. Now let's create a data variable that will hold all of our saved data. So we'll say local data equals nil. We don't want to assign it to anything yet because we don't have any data at the minute to save, or that is stored, sorry. Any data that's stored at the minute. Now what we're going to do is use a p call. I'll explain what that is in a second. So we'll say local success, error message equals p call function, and then in the function we want to say data equals DataStore :get async player.user ID. So p call is a special way to call code, but catch any errors to prevent the script from crashing or not behaving properly. So we are assigning two variables to this function. So this function has two returns. So we have a success and an error message. Success is a Boolean variable. So if this code is ran successfully without any errors, success will be true. If there is an error, we're going to set the error message. It will provide an error message. We're going to set that to the variable error message. And then in this code, we are getting the saved data that is assigned to the player's user ID. We always assign and get data from the player's user ID and not the name, because if the player changed their username, we won't be able to access their data anymore because it'll be stored on an old username. So we always use their player ID because it's constant, it's static, it doesn't change. Next we'll say if success and data then. So if the p call was successful and data does exist, data exists within the player that has been saved before, we'll say player.leaderStats.stage.value equals data, and in square brackets 1. So this will set the stage value to the saved value in position 1 of the data array. We don't want position 0. We want the second element at position 1. When you're getting the data store, all the data, all the actual saved data values, the keys are all stored from index 1 and above. If you had multiple saved values, it'd be the exact same. Just on this line, you would set the leader stats or data to data 2. So for example, let's say we had something called money. On the second line would have money.value equals data 2. And you see what I mean there. It just keeps going on. Next I'm going to drop down and say else just before this end. And if data doesn't exist and or the message wasn't successful, we are going to print the player does not have any saved data. Just so we know, this is just for us to know when we're testing the game whether or not the player has data. And that's it. This is all the code to load data. Easy. Next I'm going to create a save data function, and we're going to call this to save the data, but I'm going to make it a separate function. So I'm not going to call it when a player joins specifically, like directly, sorry. I'm going to make it its own function first, and the reason for that is because we're going to call it twice, when the player leaves and when the server shuts down. More on that a bit later though. So for now I'll call it save data equals function, and we want to pass in the player into this function. Now let's create a save table. This is going to be a table of all the content, all the save values that we want to save. So I'll say local save table equals, and then I want to open these curly braces, drop down, and the first value I want to save, the only value is player.leaderStats.stage.value. And this is just the stage we want to save. Say you were saving, back to my example earlier, let's say we had money as well. Let's say we had 4 things, okay? So we have money. Actually, I'll just do ... and then we've got n items, final value. Okay, so we're saving an n number of items here. Okay, or we're loading n number of items. If we want to save n number of items, then we'll put a semicolon at the end, and then we'd say player.leaderstats.money.value, then a semicolon. Do this for as many as you want, and in the last item, the nth item, which in our case is final value.value, we wouldn't put a semicolon on the end of this one. The last value doesn't have a semicolon. Okay, now we're going to do another p call. So what I'm going to do is, just for the sake of saving effort, I'm going to copy the one we've made up here and paste it into our save data function. So local success error message, and in here we're not going to actually call a function. we're going to, inside this p call, put in DataStore dot setAsync, not colon, but dot, comma, DataStore, comma, player dot user ID, comma, save table. So this will save the player's data here. This p call, well, it will attempt to save the data. Obviously, the p call attempts code. If it doesn't work, it throws the error or captures the error. But let's assume it is successful. What it will do is it will save the player's data using the setAsync method that is part of the DataStore service. And this setAsync will take in the player's user ID and the saved data as an argument. So this is just a way of writing it all on one line. Next we'll say if success, then we can print the data was saved successfully. Otherwise, if it wasn't successful, we'll print data was not saved. Now to actually call this save data function, you'll see why I've made this a separate function now. We want to call it when the player leaves the game, so game.players.player removing. I'm not sure if we've seen this one in this little series yet, but player removing, again, colon connect function, passing in the player. Exact same as player added, it's just this is called whenever the player leaves the game. So player added whenever the player joins, player removing when the player leaves. And all we need to do in here is call save data and pass in our player. And one more, we'll say game colon bind to close, in brackets, function, and the function we want to call is going to loop for each player. So I'm going to say for underscore comma player in I pairs game dot players dot colon get players do task dot spawn save data passing in the player. Now what this does, bind to close is a function, so this function is called whenever the server's shut down, because if the server's shut down, all the players are removed, but it won't necessarily, it might not call our data, so we want to make sure we are calling the data if the server shuts down. In which case we'll loop through each player. So I'm just using underscore. Normally you might see for I comma v in pairs or in I pairs, but I'm using underscore because we don't need the index, so there's no point. I mean, I could say I comma player, but I'm just going to use underscore because it means nothing to us, so we're not using it. Player, that's the object, so this is going to be a player object because we're looping through each player in the game. And for each player, we're going to call the save data function without stopping the rest of the script. That's sort of what task.spawn does. That's the basic idea. It'll call that function without disrupting the flow of the script, if that makes sense. Now let's test it. So let's go back to test. Make sure, remember, you've adjusted your game settings. Now I'll go to, let me mute this. I'll go to stage 2. I'll just stop the game. And you know what, I'm going to join back. Data was saved successfully. I'm going to join back and, oh look, we're back on stage 2. Perfect. I'm just going to mute it again. Now let's get to stage 3 and actually let's skip a stage because I can't be bothered to do that one. Get to stage 4 and let's die. Just make sure we spawn back onto stage 4. There we go, we do. Progress bar went a bit iffy there, but it's back to normal. Again, if you don't want that, if you just want it to always be normal, remove that wait one we talked about in the progress bar video. And just make it wait, get rid of the 1. Now if we stop it and play again, we should be on stage 4. Perfect. So that's it for this video, everyone. In the next video, we'll look at making a game pass that skips the player to the end of the obby. This was suggested by the user you can see on screen now. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. In this video, I'll show you how to create a game pass that lets you skip to the end of the obby. This was suggested by the user you see on screen now. To get started, let's head to create.roblox.com. Similar to what we did with our developer products, we want to find our game in the creations tab and click on it. Go to monetization, and this time we're going to click on passes. I'm going to hit create a pass, and you can go through all the options here. Now once you've created your game pass, you want to click on it, go to sales, and you want to put item for sale, put in a price. I will just make it 50 Robux, and you want to hit save changes. I'm not going to be selling the game pass, but to test it, I believe we do need to have it for sale. So while you're testing, just make it some Robux, click save, and then you can uncheck this later on. Next, what we'll do is hit the three dots and hit copy asset ID. I'm going to paste the ID into a text file for now, so I don't have to go back to the website if I lose it. Also, we need to make sure we go to the game settings, security, and allow third-party sales. This will enable players to purchase items and developer products, etc. Now let's create the UI. So under Starter GUI and Screen GUI, I'm going to copy our skip stage button. I'm going to put this one underneath, maybe just here. And I'll rename it. I'm going to call it skip stage. Not skip stage, so skip Obby. And I'll make the text say skip Obby. And in here, in the local script that's inside, I'm going to keep the marketplace service and the player. I'm going to paste my new product ID. And we don't need a debounce for the Gamepass. In the mouse button one click, we can remove all debounce stuff. In fact, I'll write the whole method again. So in here, all we need to say is marketplace service prompt Gamepass purchase, passing in the player and the product ID. And we don't need this prompt product purchase finished thing either. And that's it for this script. Let's close that. Now under server script service, let's add a script. And I'm going to rename it to Gamepass Handler. This is where we'll deal with the server-side processes. In here, I'm going to write players equals game::get service players, get the player service. We also want the marketplace service, so marketplace service equals game::get service marketplace service. We also want to store our checkpoints folder, so I'll say checkpoints folder equals workspace::wait for child checkpoints. And we want our ID, so say skip Gamepass ID equals, and that's our ID. Make sure you use your ID and not mine. Next we'll say marketplace service dot prompt Gamepass purchase finished, :connect function passing in the player, the pass ID, and purchased. This function is called after a Gamepass purchase prompt has been interacted with. It automatically passes in the player, the Gamepass ID, and a boolean which tells us if it was purchased or cancelled. So we'll say if purchased and pass ID equals skip Gamepass ID, then so if it was purchased and the Gamepass ID that was purchased matches our Gamepass ID, so we know they're buying the right Gamepass, we'll say player.leaderstats.stage.value equals the number of, so remember hashtag means the number of checkpoints folder, :GetChildren, so the number of children within the checkpoints folder. And this will set the player's stage to the maximum stage in the game. We can say _g.player loaded, passing in the player, and this will reload the player onto the new checkpoint, because if you remember we made that global function player loaded, which will load the player to their checkpoint, their stage. Now finally in the leader stats script, we just need to make some adjustments. So we'll add the marketplace service at the top. So marketplace service equals game::get service marketplace service. We'll also get the checkpoints folder equals workspace::wait for child checkpoints. We'll also get our Gamepass, skip Gamepass ID equals, and then our Gamepass ID. And now underneath this character added function, I'm going to add if marketplace service user owns Gamepass async player.user ID skip Gamepass ID. Then so after the player joins the game, we want to check if they own the Gamepass, because if we added any new levels while they were away, we need to make sure they still go to the end of the obby and not the previous level that they bought the Gamepass at. So we just say player. It's basically the exact same as this bit here, this Gamepass handler, so we can copy that. Player.leaderstats.stage.value because the number of checkpoint folder. Why isn't it working? Oh, I put checkpoints there, so I just remove that checkpoint folder. :GetChildren, and then reload the player. Exact same. We did this in the leader stats script because we want to make sure we run this code after everything else has loaded. It's not good to load the player onto the highest stage before they've loaded onto their saved stage, because otherwise they'll just spawn back. So they'll load onto the final stage, and then when all their data loads in, they'll just go back to the stage they were on. so we need to do this thing last. We will need to run 2 tests. First, we need to reset the DataStore to a new name, so you start on stage 1. So let's go to DataStore. I've been playing around a little bit, obviously, testing code to make this work anyway. So I'm now in DataStore 4, but I'll make this DataStore 5. You might make it 1 or 2. Just a new save that you've not been on yet, just to make sure that your data is back to stage 1. Now let's press play and see what happens. Because we created the Gamepass, we already own it. This means we're teleported to the last level, so that works. If you created the Gamepass under a group, you'll not own it, and you will have to test it with a Gamepass ID that you own. So if you've never bought a Gamepass before, if you don't have any Gamepasses that you own, to test this, you will need to create a Gamepass under your user rather than a group, and use that ID. I'll show you how to swap the IDs out in a minute, but basically you just want to change all the ID variables to a new ID that you own. For our second test, we'll need to change the 3 ID variables we have stored to a new ID that exists for another Gamepass that we don't own. This doesn't have to be in our game, it could be any game. Let's just find a random Roblox game with Gamepasses and copy one of those IDs. Here I found a game called Tycoon RNG. I'm going to pick this VIP and copy the ID. The ID will be this string of characters in the URL bar. Now let's replace our saved IDs with this one. I'm just going to make a note of what my one is again, just because I don't still have it in that text file. I think that's it. Where else did we have it? We also had it in the... Don't forget to change it in this local script here. There we go. Now if we hit play and purchase it, it'll say, would you like to buy it? It'll say VIP because that's the Gamepass that I'm using. This is a test purchase, by the way. You will not be charged actual Robux. It says 700, but it won't take 700 out of my account. There we go. Let's click it and see what happens. So, before I can test this, I did forget to mention I will obviously need a new data store because I'm on the max level on that one. So let's go back to stage 1. And now let's buy the Gamepass. So we buy it, and it teleports us to the final stage. Perfect. It is important to note that testing a Gamepass in Roblox Studio works similarly to testing a developer product. It acts as a one-time purchase in Studio, meaning the user owns Gamepass async will always return true while testing in Roblox Studio. You won't actually have the Gamepass. That is why we need to test it with passes we don't own as well. So now let's just change it back because we know that works fine. So I've got my ID there. There we go. So that's everything. Perfect. So it all works. There's not much more to say, so that's it for this video, everyone. And the series, in fact. If I get any more suggestions, I will consider doing a video on them. So please do leave me suggestions. But as for now, that's it. So thanks for watching, everyone, and goodbye. I hope you found the series helpful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Because it really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And goodbye.